Hi there, my name is Madison Musinski, and I've created this video for a project for an online journalism class at Rowan University. In this video, I will be analyzing the journalistic issue of propaganda via the ethical lens of Immanuel Kant. To start, I want to explain a little bit of Kant's ethical theory. For one, Kant was a member of the non-consequentialist group Deontological Ethics. To break that down a little bit, non-consequentialism is a form of ethics that is not concerned with the outcome or consequence of a situation, but rather is merely interested in the decision itself. Deontological ethics, however, is the study of duty, and it essentially argues that to be an ethical person, one must follow a set of universal rules because it is our duty to do so as ethical people. These universal rules are not situational and are not concerned with context. And basically, that means that if the decision is right, it will always be right. And alternatively, if the decision is wrong, it will always be wrong. Furthermore, Kant argues that while the outcome of the situation doesn't matter, the intention or motive to make that decision does. Essentially, you must ask yourself as you're making a decision, am I doing this because I benefit from it, or am I doing it because it is my ethical duty to do so? A Kantian would answer, because it was my duty. So, to follow one of the most important features of Kant's ethics is called the categorical imperative. This imperative has two parts. One, act as if your actions would become universal. And two, do not treat people as a means to an end. And in just a minute, I'll be using this theory to evaluate the ethicality of propaganda. However, before I start my ethical application, I want to talk a little bit more about the journalistic issue of propaganda, which America has kind of dealt with over and over again throughout time. Um, as Carl Hausman defines, propaganda is a one-sided, deliberately misleading message, often designed to be hurtful to a person or group. When we think of propaganda, typically we envision something like the posters that were used to recruit soldiers into the U.S. Army. Think Uncle Sam. However, as Albinko Hasek notes in the Washington Post, the digital landscape is changing the form of propaganda. To quote Hasek, propaganda is easily produced, mass disseminated, and politically pointed with the potential to do even greater damage to American politics and society than propaganda posters did a century ago. And this is really why propaganda is worth evaluating. On that note, I want to discuss the issue of the Russian propaganda that ultimately impacted the outcome of the United States 2016 election cycle. As Scott Shane of the New York Times reported, Russia had purchased countless Facebook ads with the intention of tipping the election in favor of Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. 4 years later, during the current election cycle, 2020, Facebook is still confronting the issue of Russian digital propaganda. As Peter Kafka of Vox reports, Facebook is still in the process of removing the Russian and Iranian fake accounts in order to decrease the creation and spread of propaganda that could negatively impact the security and future of American elections. So, were we to uphold the issue of propaganda to the ethical standards of Kant, would its use be considered ethical or unethical? To figure this out, we would need to apply Kant's categorical imperative to it. So let's start by naming propaganda a form of deceit. Because in essence, propaganda is lying. If we were to act as if all forms of deceit were to become the norm, would it be okay? Take a minute to self evaluate. But in truth, the answer is it probably wouldn't be okay. It's difficult to justify the ethical validity of lying to people, especially in order to cause harm to them. So Kant would argue that it is our ethical duty to be truthful to people. Um, and as a small aside, it's also important to note that journalism and media. Wow, talking is so hard, guys. Journalism and media as a whole upholds that duty of truth as a fundamental principle. Second, it's necessary to evaluate whether the use of propaganda is treating people as a means to an end. In this scenario, Russia deceived the American public so that they could get Trump elected to office. Undeniably, they favored their own interests above ours or the American citizens. And thus, they kind of treated the American people pretty terribly so that they could achieve their own goals. So, undeniably, Kantian ethics would classify the use of propaganda as unethical. And although propaganda could be evaluated through countless ethical lenses, I think that we would undeniably come to the same conclusion that it is unethical, specifically in media. Um, we have a duty to the American public and alternatively all the other publics. But in conclusion, don't lie. Kant says not to. Thank you for watching the video. This is Maddie.